In 1973, 18-year-old Greg Neeld was rated among the top prospects in junior hockey. He was a mobile, smooth skating defenseman with size, grit, and vision, both literally and figuratively. That all changed due to a gruesome, life-altering injury accidentally caused by a future NHL star. Despite this misfortune, this cursed prodigy would go on to have a major impact on the sport of hockey, although even that recognition would eventually be stolen from him. Welcome to the Pro Hockey Alumni channel, where we celebrate the legends of hockey's golden era, 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. In addition to our lead story, stick around for more classic tales, including a look back at two recently deceased NHL legends and the story of another all-star whose career ended suddenly due to an eye injury. Now, born in Vancouver, British Columbia in 1955, Greg Neeld established himself as a future star right away. His father was a pilot for Air Canada, transferred to Toronto to further Greg's career. By 1971, Greg Neeld had earned a spot in the powerful Toronto Marlboros of the OHA. Neeld was ticketed for stardom, and his parents, especially his mom, would gain notoriety for their intense micromanagement of Greg's career. Now, despite these controversies, Neeld fit in well with a star-studded group of Marlies that included Mark Howe, Mike Palmateer, Wayne Dillon, and about 12 future pros. In an age when everyone was seeking out the, quote, next Bobby Orr, Neeld was racing up the list of hockey's top young defensive prospects. The Marlboros, after some controversy, finally were able to sign Greg Neeld, and no less than the esteemed Roger Neilson said, quote, "This kid is another Bobby Orr. He's so good that if Neeld and Mark Howe were both available in the midget draft, Neeld would be picked first." With the WHA in existence, big money awaited such a blue liner, and just ask Pat Price and Greg Jolly. Then came December 7, 1973. The visiting Kitchener Rangers led the Marlies 8-3 with 5 minutes remaining. The puck was dumped into the Kitchener end of the ice. Neeld beat 16-year-old Kitchener defenseman Dave Maloney to the puck in the corner. Maloney reached with his stick to hook him. The stick accidentally went high and gouged Neeld's left eye. Neeld collapsed to the ice, screaming to his teammates that he could not see. And Maloney received a 5-minute major, and Neeld got a lifetime sentence. Maloney went on to sign a 3-year, $400,000 contract with the NHL New York Rangers, and Neeld had his left eye removed shortly before Christmas. Still feeling remorse today, Maloney says, quote, "He was a hell of a player. I felt terrible, and I still feel terrible. It was horrible, horrible thing." According to Neeld, quote, "To lose an eye like that is quite traumatic. It's an emotional thing. You get a stick in the eye, and as deep as it went into my eye, that was the most painful thing I've ever had happen to me in my entire life. I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. When the doctors told me my eye would have to be removed, I cried for about 5 minutes. Then I wiped my face, and when the tears were gone, I made up my mind that this was not going to stop me from playing hockey. I never asked why me. Never have. The way I looked at it was, why not me? Somebody has to suffer an injury like that. Why shouldn't it be me?" At 18 years old, Neeld didn't want his dream to end. That's understandable. He wanted to keep playing. The Marlies told him he had to sign a waiver, get his own insurance, wear full face protection. But all that was available was wire mask from CCM hockey. But wearing that, Greg couldn't see his feet. He asked his father, Norm, to clip out the wire around the eyes and put in a plastic shield. And there it was, the Neeld shield, the visor that didn't fog, didn't obstruct, and actually worked. Norm Neeld, the Air Canada pilot with an engineer's mind, cracked the formula and sought a patent. 3 months after his operation, Greg returned to the Marlboros, becoming the first player to wear a full face shield. Now, he recalls, quote, "I lost vision to my left, but my good eye got stronger over a 1-year period. My peripheral vision improved another 35 degrees, and my hearing and my left ear got really good. I could tell when a player was beside me just by the swishing of his skates. I could tell the intensity he was coming with." Greg played a few late-season games with the Marlies, but the one surefire NHL star was waived out of the entire OHA. Meanwhile, Neild's traumatized dad told Greg's agent, the notorious Alan Eagleson, that he wanted to sue Dave Maloney in the NHL. The NHL had rules for player eligibility, and one of them was a minimum sight requirement in both eyes. Lawsuits and appeals failed to get the NHL to change that requirement. Greg's childhood dream of playing in the NHL, one that was so close to realization, was now gone. Upon reflection, it's no surprise that double-dealing Eagleson urged the Neelds to cease any efforts to continue litigating with the NHL. Neeld played his final junior season with the Calgary Centennials of the Western League, and he scored 30 goals, often playing center. Although he was not the same player naturally with one eye as he was with two, he was still drafted by the Buffalo Sabres in round 4 of the 1975 NHL draft, in the third round by the WHA Minnesota Fighting Saints. But while the lawyers argued about the NHL eligibility, Greg kept skating. In 1975, he joined the Toronto Toros of the WHA on a 3-year deal valued at $30,000 per year. The Toros was stacked with offensive talent: Frank Mahovlich, Paul Henderson, Vaclav Damansky, and Rookie of the Year Mark Napier. And they could score, but defense and goaltending, those were problems. Coach Bobby Bond brought in Greg, hoping he could help shore up the D. And Greg played 17 games, but he struggled. He was benched. Due to the rules regarding vision-impaired players, Greg couldn't play in the American Hockey League. So he went lower, and Greg Neeld's low-level minor league odyssey was underway. The Buffalo Norsemen in the North American League, Erie, Dayton, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Toledo, and Muskegon. His career was dying, but he just wanted to keep playing. One eye, adjusting, and surviving. He trained, he fought, he adapted. But the dream was over. Quote, obviously, I would rather have not lost my eye and gone on to play in the National Hockey League, which were my childhood dreams, said Neeld. But since it didn't happen to me, I see the positive out of it. It was the advent of the visor. His dad tried to sell the patent to the Neeld Shield. Big manufacturers wouldn't bite. And when that patent expired in the mid-1990s, the same companies had free access to everything Norm Neeld had already figured out. Suddenly, visors on the market got better. And Neeld said, quote, they screwed us. We never got a dime. That's a business lesson he never forgot. First, the NHL shut him out. Then manufacturers profited from his father's work. Hockey had moved on without the Neelds. In 1974, Canadian hockey had a crisis. In the 1974 season alone, just one season, there were 258 documented hockey-related eye injuries across Canada. 43 kids were blinded. Now think about that. 43 families, 43 dreams ended, 43 kids who went to play a game and came home unable to see. The Canadian Amateur Hockey Association couldn't ignore it anymore. In 1975, they made facial protection mandatory for minor hockey. They were inspired directly by what happened to Greg Neeld. The results were immediate. By 2001, 26 years later, that number had dropped from 43 blindings a year to just 2. Now, Greg Neeld never made the NHL, but he saved more careers than most Hall of Famers ever will. Today, every NHL rookie wears a half visor, and only a handful of veterans play without one. And it started with a traumatized teenager, a devoted father with wire cutters, and a kid who refused to let one moment define him. Greg Neeld achieved success as president of Vancouver-based Hawkeye Gold and Diamond Incorporated. Yes, Hawkeye is his nickname. He still has a sense of humor about his situation, saying, quote, it's all fun and games until someone loses an eye. He also says, what I'm really proud of is 30 eyes are being saved a year because of my eye injury and the invention of the Neeld Shield. I'm proud of the part of hockey history that my eye injury has played. Now, particularly our fans in Canada, perhaps in the Ontario area or Calgary area, perhaps you remember Greg Neeld and his story. Feel free to share your memories in the comments below.
Find a man in position, gets it to McMillan. McMillan can't shoot it. He scores! Right into the top right-hand corner. And a great shot.
Guy Chouinard was one of the NHL's great playmakers of the 1970s and early 80s, playing center primarily for the Atlanta and Calgary Flames. He started in junior hockey with the Quebec Remparts, piling up 160 points in 62 games in 73-74 on a team with future pros like Real Buddy Cloutier and Jacques the Jetman Loca. Guy was a second-round selection, 28th overall in the 74 draft by the Atlanta Flames. You may remember this was the secret underage draft at the peak of the WHA NHL signing wars. Now, his head coach, Bernie Boom Boom Geoffrion, was not enthralled with young Guy, referring to him as, quote, yellow. Nicknamed Gramps as he looked older than his age, Chouinard had several solid, low-key seasons in Atlanta before he exploded in 78-79, scoring 50 goals and 107 points. That year, he centered the gem line with Bobby McMillan and Eric Big Train Vale. That 50-goal campaign became a double-edged sword of expectations for Chouinard as he never again approached that total. Now, after the Flames moved to Calgary, Chouinard made history by scoring the first goal in Calgary Flames history on October 9, 1980. Now, probably the apex of his career came in 80-81, where he racked up 83 points in just 53 games as the Flames made a 3-playoff round run. With Guy and the Magic Man Kent Nilsson as playmaking centers, the Flames scored 329 goals that season. But by 81-82, the slow-skating Chouinard had frequently found himself in Coach Al McNeil's doghouse, and he was often booed by Calgary fans. He also suffered numerous injuries, most notably missing multiple games after getting his eye gouged by Kenny the Rat Linsman. Guy remained a gifted passer, and he continued to make line mates better. And that was most evident in 82-83. He was paired with Lanny MacDonald, and MacDonald racked up a career-high 66 goals. Lanny still recalls being amazed at the perfect passes he'd received from Guy. But the Smythe division, particularly the Edmonton Oilers, was emphasizing speed. Guy began to fall a step behind the plate, and he was relegated to power play duty in 83-84. Flames thought he was done at the ripe old age of 26 and basically gave him away to the St. Louis Blues. He left the Flames franchise as its all-time leader in points and assists. After a so-so year in St. Louis, the Blues cut him loose with a year remaining on his contract. After retirement, he coached 16 seasons in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League and was inducted into that league's Hall of Fame in 2005. Guy remains ninth all-time in Flames scoring. Over 10 NHL seasons, he totaled 575 points in 578 games. Guy Chouinard passed away on December 29, 2025, at the age of 69.
Now to Lowell MacDonald, hit the post, bounced off Bobby Orr and went in. Lowell MacDonald holding, scored! Lowell MacDonald, a brilliant play here.
Lowell MacDonald's NHL career was defined by perseverance. Now, he had a great junior career with the Hamilton Red Wings of the OHA and broke into the six-team NHL in the early 60s with the Detroit Red Wings. He worked his way through the minors and eventually landed with the Los Angeles Kings, the expansion year of 67-68, where he proved he could score at the highest level. But hockey in LA demanded something else from him: constant air travel, and MacDonald had a fear of flying. Rather than fight it, he stepped away, choosing his education. That was unheard of. Encouraged by his wife Joyce and former Kings coach Red Kelly, who was now the coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins, Lowell MacDonald returned after missing nearly the entire 69-70 season. Then came the knee injuries, one after another. In 1970-71, he played just 10 games, and he missed the entire 71-72 season. Now 3 years out of the league, his career appeared to be finished. But thanks to an innovative surgical procedure from the Penguins medical staff, Lowell didn't just come back, he thrived. In 72-73, he scored 34 goals, had 75 points, and a plus-minus rating of plus 36, playing left wing on a line with the center Syl Apps and right wing Al McDonough. That amazing comeback earned him the Bill Masterton Memorial Trophy, awarded for dedication and perseverance to the game. Lowell was even better the next season, scoring a career-high 43 goals, earning his second consecutive All-Star Game selection. Now, when McDonough jumped to the WHA in 1974, Jean Pronovost stepped in with McDonald and Apps, and they formed the famed Century Line. But injuries never stopped chasing Lowell. After 4 productive seasons, his knees finally gave out. In 1977, McDonald left the NHL with 390 points in just over 500 NHL games. He spent the next 18 years as head coach of the University School of Milwaukee, compiling more than 260 wins and earning induction into the Wisconsin Hockey Coaches Hall of Fame. His son Lowell was a Penguins TV producer, and his son Lane won the Hobey Baker Award playing at Harvard University. Lowell MacDonald passed away on December 28, 2025, at the age of 84. A couple years ago, I attended the Philadelphia Flyers reunion of their 74 and 75 Stanley Cup teams. One player at that point, who obviously was not there, was the late Barry Ashbee. And what a great story of courage and perseverance. His road to the NHL and his success once he got there. And, of course, the double tragedies of his life, the severe eye injury, of course, the national TV, and, of course, the illnesses that eventually would take his life. Let's take a look back at Barry Ashbee and that traumatic injury as we reflect back on Greg Neeld's situation. I keep wondering when I watch these things how these things didn't happen more often, without visors, without helmets, sticks, pucks, everything. It was a dangerous game to play then. It still is now, but especially back then. I give these guys a lot of credit. Barry Ashbee, a profile in courage, coming right up. The 1973-74 season was Ashbee's best. But as mid-season rolled around, He was left off the Western Division All-Star team, and he was angry. Ashbee took out his frustration on the rest of the NHL. He finished the year with a phenomenal plus-minus rating of plus 52, the best on the Flyers. After the season, he was named a second-team NHL All-Star by the league and selected to the All-Western Conference team compiled by the Hockey News. But individual honors were secondary to Ashbee. He wanted hockey's ultimate prize, the Stanley Cup. Ashbee's 73-74 performance was particularly impressive considering he played with a chipped vertebrae in his back, bursitis in his elbow, and a pinched nerve in his neck that forced him to wear a protective horse collar. His left side was often so numb he could barely grab his stick. In constant agony, he could hardly bend over to tie his skates. Still, Ashbee was his usual quiet, effective self in the Flyers' first-round sweep of the Atlanta Flames. And then he stood tall as the Flyers took a 2-1 series lead in the semifinals versus the New York Rangers. Game 4 was an overtime thriller, won by the Rangers to tie the series, but at 1:27 of the overtime period, Ashbee's career would come to a sudden and sickening end.
Face off to the right of Bernie Perron. Bobby Clark and Stemkowski gets it. Rolfe, a shot that hit Barry Ashbee. A shot wide. Ashbee is down and hurt. Ashbee was hit right in the face with a shot by Dale Rolfe. He is in great pain down there, and they're coming out quickly with trainer Frank Lewis and calling for the doctor to come out. A high rising shot by Rolfe caught Barry Ashbee right in the face. We're going downstairs now to Brian McFarland, who is right out there on the ice.
I talked to the linesman, and Barry Ashbee was hit just on the eyelid, just above the right eye. It is a bad gash, according to the officials. Matt, you were there. Could you describe it?
Just above the eyelid, between the eyelid and the eyebrow.
Well, there's a lot of blood, and they moved quickly to get Barry Ashbee off the ice on this stretcher. And he's holding both hands over the wound. So the injury again is just above the right eye, a bad cut. And that's the story right down here at ice level.
Ashbee was rushed to a hospital in New York. The diagnosis confirmed his worst fears. Heavy hemorrhaging had caused permanent scarring of the retina. Ashbee was partially blinded in his right eye. His hockey career was over. With a combination of great pride and sadness, Ashbee sat on the sidelines as the Flyers went on to beat the Rangers in 7 games and then knock off Bobby Orr and the Boston Bruins in 6 games to win the Stanley Cup. After his long and torturous journey to the NHL, Ashbee's name would be etched on the Stanley Cup. Wearing dark glasses, Ashbee told his teammates, "Boys, cherish this group. There'll never be another one like it." And to the press he said, "Don't write me up as a tragic figure. Right now I'm the happiest man alive. Some people strive for 60 years and never make it. I got what I wanted when I was 34. With his playing career behind him, Ashbee was ready to leave hockey, move back to Toronto, find another job, and spend more time with his family. He also had a stake in a pro lacrosse franchise. But the Flyers asked him repeatedly over the summer of '74 if he'd become an assistant coach to Fred Shero. At first he said no, fearing the invitation was an act of charity. But the innovative Fred Shero was the first NHL coach to have an assistant coach, selecting Ashbee's longtime Hershey teammate Mike Nikoluk. Shero, Allen, and Clark convinced the skeptical Ashbee that they wanted him around for his hockey knowledge and leadership, not as a figurehead. So in August 1974, Ashbee agreed and arrived at camp as the Flyers' second assistant coach, primarily working with defensemen. After overcoming his initial discomfort, Ashbee settled into the role and even began to relish his job. In addition, the Flyers created team awards to be presented to players at the end of the season, and the award for the team's best defenseman was named the Barry Ashbee Trophy. Ashbee was adamant, however, that he did not want the team to recognize his playing career with a special night in his honor. However, in April 1975, Ashbee reluctantly agreed to be celebrated at the Spectrum. With wife Donna and the children standing by his side, accolades poured in for the proud warrior. Then the Flyers revealed the night's biggest surprise. All the players on the team had chipped in and bought Ashbee a brand new camper. Ashbee was behind the bench when the Flyers won their second Stanley Cup in 1975 and went on to their third straight Stanley Cup Finals in 1976. His coaching future looked bright. In February 1977, Coach Ashbee worked a booth at the first Flyers Wives Fight for Life's Carnival. Little did he realize that circumstances of his own life would soon give this event new meaning. In April 1977, as the Flyers in dignity. By celebrating Barry Ashbee, the Flyers also paid tribute to all the players who came before him and after him, the unsung men who toiled and sacrificed just for a chance to compete in the NHL. Thank you for watching the Pro Hockey Alumni channel. Please share your comments in the comment section below. As I said before, I really enjoy those comments. We've got a very educated and intelligent audience and real connoisseurs of classic hockey. So I gain a lot when I read those comments. And also when I make mistakes of spelling and pronunciation or things of that nature, you guys are always there to remind me, which I appreciate. We got to keep the standards high here. Meanwhile, let's check out another video of a player who helped make the game great right here.
Find a man in position, gets it to McMillan. McMillan can't shoot it, does he score? Right into the top right-hand corner.
And a great shot